Hey everyone, welcome to session 209 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. I am really excited to bring back my good buddy, Dr. Paulie Gavoni, to the podcast. As longtime listeners know, he's been on the show many, many times, and he always brings a down-to-earth, practical point of view to the things we do as behavior analysts. Here's the context for this show. He recently gave a talk at the Hoosier Association for Behavior Analysts event. And in preparation for that talk, he did a deep dive on the characteristics of bad leadership and talked about this concept of positional authority. And apparently it went over really well. So he reached out to me and suggested that we talk about it on Behavioral Observations. So here we are. I won't spoil it or go into it too much here. So you're just going to want to listen to it in Paulie's own words. And this is a really fun podcast because Paulie and I do talk all the time. And so there's a bit of a kind of casual banter, much like the show with Matt Broadhead a few sessions ago. On a related note, speaking of talking all the time, one of the reasons that we do connect frequently is because both Paulie and I, along with our colleague Anika Costa, are working on a special project. And I don't want to spoil that here either, but it should be hopefully ready to go by the first quarter of 2023, so stay tuned for that. We have links to all the things that we mentioned in the show notes, so go over to behavioralobservations.com and look for session 209. And the easiest way to get the show notes, honestly, is just to sign up for the email list. So just go to the website. There'll be a little box in the sidebar. There might be one of those pop-up things you can sign up for as well. Makes it really easy. And the show notes for every single episode go directly to your email inbox. So I highly encourage that. That way you never have to go to behavioralobservations.com again, unless, of course, you're buying CEUs, and that's fine too. But anyway, this podcast is brought to you by the Empowering Parents with ACT course from Praxis Continuing Education and Training, taught by Drs. Lisa Coyne and Dr. Evelyn Gould. This course presents a powerful ACT training-based approach to supporting parents and caregivers with evidence-based interventions. Designed for anyone who works with caregivers and their families, including children with mental health issues, autism, physical or developmental differences, chronic health issues, and other challenges, this self-paced training will help you work with caregivers to help their families grow and thrive. To watch a free video lesson from Empowering Parents with ACT, go to praxiscet.com/parents. And again, I'll have that link in the show notes if that's too much of a mouthful to remember. We're also brought to you by Session 204 guest Rose Griffin's free masterclass, The Power of Joint Attention. Did I mention it was free? In this 30-minute training, you'll learn how to use books in therapy so your students are running over to listen to you read. The course then also moves on to using songs in therapy so that your students are eager to participate and play so that they're ready to engage with you every session. Rose shares 3 actionable tips that you can use in your next therapy session. She also shares bonus printables that you can use and share with parents as well. So again, the link for that is in the show notes for this episode. And we're, last but not least, brought to you by the University of Cincinnati Online. UC Online designed a Master of Education in Behavior Analysis program that is 100% online and asynchronous, meaning you log on when it works for you. If you want to learn more, go to online.uc.edu and click the Request Info button. All right, that's it for opening remarks. So without any further delay, let's get to this fun conversation with Dr. Paulie Gavoni.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Dr. Paulie Gavoni, welcome back to the Behavioral Observations Podcast. How's it going?
It's going good, man. You know, it was the first time that I was on the podcast with you. It was some years ago.
Oh, it's got to be 2017, 2018. I don't know. It was you and Nick Weatherly that we were talking about deliberate coaching, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, was that the first? No, I think
No. Yeah, you were on before that, I think. Yeah. So yeah.
I'm like a double OG on.
Oh yeah, you're in the you're in the top tier of returning guests for sure.
Yeah, I'm honored, man. It's always great to talk with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm spoiled because I get to talk to you quite frequently, and we always have a lot of fun conversations about how we're going to fix all the problems under the sun. But
and man, we should maybe put the recorder on when we're talking, having that kind of talk.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine? So. So, well, this is an attempt, I guess, maybe do an approximation of that. Let's see how it goes. Except with a little better, little more proper language, I suppose. But anyway, you had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just did this talk, and it went over really well, and I think it would be something of interest to the audience, and it's kind of centered around bad leadership. So tell me about." Where you did this talk, who asked you to do it, and what was the motivation for the request to do it?
Well, I'll tell you, I did at HABA, and I love HABA. That's the Hoosier Applied Behavior Analysis. They're such good people, man. I spoke out there a few years back, and just warm and just a great conference. For me, it's the perfect size conference, and there were some very cool people out there doing it. But when they sent me an invite, and I said, "Well, what would you like me to talk about?" And like, well, we just heard you do one of your podcasts on positional authority, and bad. I think it was titled "Ain't Leading Leadership" or something along those lines. Positional authority ain't leadership. And so I thought, all right, well, I would love to come out and talk about that. Quite a while ago, I wrote an article with Manny Rodriguez called Dr. Manny Rodriguez now, called Mr. Positional Power, Mr. Positional Authority. I wish I could smack you. And it starts off with I was inspired by well, first of all, I have run into a lot of bad leadership, not bad people. It's behavior, but bad leadership. But I usually write or go talk or get motivation when I see something like either really good or really bad. And unfortunately, 80% of the time, something is really bad. And I was at like a, I don't want to say the car dealer, but it was a car dealer chain. I was getting oil change. And I was like just standing outside. I think I might have just arrived. And this woman had come up, and she was a black woman. She must have been foreign, and maybe from the islands or something. And apparently she parked in the wrong spot. Well, the guy that ran the spot came out, and he started yelling at her, and he grabbed the keys out of her hand and told her, "You need to park over here." But it was crazy. It was like nasty. I'm like, I can't stand to see people treated so poorly. So I got pissed, man. And of course, nobody ever says anything. And I don't blame you. It's dangerous to say something. Fortunately, I'm a fighter and I have a background, so I have a little more confidence in that area. So I said something. I was respectful. I said, "Excuse me, like, I'm just wondering, like, why would you speak to the woman like that?" And, "Well, she should know better." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's the signs right there." I'm like, she's foreign. Maybe she didn't understand the signs. She knows better. Well, even if she did, why would you speak to her that way? "Well, what do you care?" He said. And I said, "Well, I think more people should care about how everybody else is being treated, because it's not okay." And, and then he just walked away, and I'm like, all right. And I called their corporate and told them how I felt about it. And a little while later, the next day I got an apology from him, and I'm like, I don't, appreciate that. It's not me you should be apologizing to. It's the woman. And it's, we just need to treat people like humans. Even people do things bad all the time. That doesn't mean you, like, two wrongs don't make a right. You don't just jump on somebody. So that inspired this article, Mr. Positional Power, I Wish I Could Smack You. And I really did wish I could smack him, though I wouldn't, because I don't want to go to jail, but I felt it inside.
The thought went across your mind.
The thought did cross my mind, and it has a few times.
I was going to ask if you put him in a rear naked chokehold.
Man, if people could see what was in my mind sometimes when I see kind of bad stuff like that. I was bullied growing up, man. I cannot stand to see people bullied or anything in the approximation of it. So I kind of feel that way. And I've seen this kind of thing with bad leadership, but where sometimes it feels like bullying. And, I ended up going back to school and getting 2 degrees in leadership. And was fortunate to be able to look at it through an OBM lens, and I kind of really look at leadership. The DNA of leadership is applied behavior analysis. And the greatest toolbox that we have is organizational behavior management. So, looking at leadership through that lens has, been eye-opening for me, and been able to help me to maybe support leadership and be a better, engage in better leading myself. Which, by the way, again, leadership isn't about title, man. It's not. I look at, if all this stuff is functional. Like, I mean, I'm sure I can ask you, have you ever been somewhere and worked for somebody in a leadership position, but they weren't leading very well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You see it all the time, man. It's like the 80-20 rule. And unfortunately, when it's leadership, that the 80% are hurting a lot of people inadvertently. In our field, certainly it trickles right down to the consumers, but I look at leading as like it's a grand like EO, right? They set a vision, and they get behavior. They have a value and behavior altering effects, right? And they get people moving towards like a common goal. And if you're not, which we call this inspiration, they inspire people, motivate them to move towards the goal, and that's leading. And so you don't have to be in a position of authority to engage in leadership behavior, to engage in leading, because anywhere from in the org chart, people can actually lead, right? They inspire people. And look at, managing is leveraging the existing contingencies. So if a leader set like a goal, vision, they said, we're going to go, visit Matt Sequoia in Maine. Are you in Maine or New Hampshire?
New Hampshire.
All right, see, I already screwed that up. But bad leadership.
Okay.
So we're going to visit you there.
You were
right?
just here in September, no biggie.
Yeah. and then we said, they're like, hey, this is why we're going to do it. And everybody's like, yeah, let's go there. Well, managing is about leveraging the existing contingencies to make sure, we're on the road and heading in the right direction. We're like the guardrails, right? To make sure that people are getting to where they need to go effectively and efficiently, right? If that makes sense. And I look at training as skill acquisition. That's the function of that. And coaching is about supporting the acquisition of the learned skills into the natural environment, right? Getting in touch with, naturally occurring reinforcers so it maintains behavior. So a person, especially in a leadership position, probably has to wear all of these hats, right? They have to engage in leading and managing and training, even if it's their direct reports sometimes, and coaching. And that happens throughout. So, but I've seen a lot of bad leadership. Again, not necessarily bad people. We'll talk about maybe some bad people later on, but bad, bad behavior.
We'll observe the circumstantial view of life, although we might use bad leader and bad leadership interchangeably at times, just to slip into some colloquialisms. Everyone, we're going to take a quick break here and let you know that this part of the podcast is brought to you by Rose Griffin's free masterclass, The Power of Joint Attention. In this 30-minute training, you'll learn how to use books in your therapy session so your students and clients run over to you to listen to your... Everyone, this part of the podcast is brought to you by Rose Griffin's free masterclass, The Power of Joint Attention. In this 30-minute training, you'll learn how to use books in therapy so that your clients are running over to listen to you read. The course also moves on to using songs in therapy so that your clients are eager to participate and play, and so that they are ready to engage with you every session. Rose shares 3 actionable tips that you can use in your next therapy session and shares bonus printables that you can use and share with parents. Get her best-kept secrets for student engagement. For more information about this and to download again the free 30-minute masterclass, go to the show notes of this episode to learn more. All right, let's get back to this podcast. Before we get into some of the telltale signs of what you might consider bad leadership, I'm curious how you identify these practices first. Obviously, you've got these anecdotes that are poignant, and I think those are things that we all can, probably have experienced, and maybe not at the car dealership, but at a restaurant or wherever in our walks of lives. But you did put together a kind of you went through this list in your presentation because you were kind enough to send me the slide deck, and so I'm just curious what the deep dive that you must have done on. So how did you research this topic of bad leadership practices aside from make your own kind of personal experiences or absorbing these various anecdotes that you've either had directly or people have told you about?
Yeah. I mean, I have, again, I have 2 degrees in leadership, but I look at it, it's just like basic, it's applied behavior analysis. when I look at it through the lens and this OBM lens, it just makes like perfect sense to me. And of course, I've read all sorts of books on leadership. Aubrey Daniels is my guy. I was very fortunate to spend some time with Aubrey Daniels International up there and learn about performance management. And, we got good friends, Dr. Nick Weatherly, who I've written a book with. He was from ADI, and Francisco Gomez and Dr. Ken Wagner. These are all like my buddies that I met up at ADI. And so, when you kind of have this OBM lens on, which by the way, I think every behavior analyst should learn OBM, because when you start trying to get, results through the behavior of others, well, then you're really kind of engaging in some OBM stuff. So I think it's really just about that, man. It's about looking at it through that lens. And, of course, in my own values, what's important to me. And, and I believe that, when you do value helping people, you can't just be looking at the result. Like in our field, for example, like if you really value the consumer and the services that we're providing them, well, you cannot value the consumer without valuing your employees, because to bring out the best in the consumer and give them what they need, you got to bring out the best in the employees. And when you have, bad leadership, it has a really nasty ripple effect across an entire organization, even if it's inadvertent. And of course, people aren't performing to the best all the time, and that's going to happen. But the measure of the leader can be found in the behavior of the followers. And so leaders really have to reflect on their own behavior. And so when, again, coming back to the OBM, looking at it through that lens, I think it's practical. It just makes sense to me. And I'm like, Richard Fox talked about natural behavior analysts, like I always felt like I was one of those guys. There's people that have dive much deeper into the research, but it's almost like common sense to me. When I unpack, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense behaviorally as well.
How, in your view, do these leaders, how do people get to these positions not having these appropriate managerial and leadership skills in their repertoires already? How does someone ascend the, there's that, what's that saying, promoted to the level of your incompetence or something like that. I forget what, there's all sorts of funny kind of almost management meme-esque type of, adages and whatnot. But just in your view, Paulie, when you encounter someone who is struggling in their leadership practices and they're in this position of power, and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, how did this person get here? Like, can you suggest some hypotheses about how that might come to be?
Yeah. And I've thought that a lot, how they get there. But I do want to say this before we start unpacking some of this stuff. I don't want people to feel bad who are listening to this, because remember, it's behavior. And so like if you see yourself, and a lot of this behavior that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, I engage in as well, so it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And, part of, people tend to be poor observers of their behaviors, poor observers of the impact of their behavior on the environment, and poor observers of the impact of the environment on their behavior. Right. And so when you kind of keep your behavior analytic lens all the time and start to try to be better observers of your behavior, and that includes your covert behavior as well, and how you're impacting people, you can start really changing and having a positive impact, because in the end it's about behavior and results, right? We're trying to produce results. So in terms of like how people got into these positions, I think there's a few. These are just my guesses at it and what my experience. One is that they were like really good at their job. And so, there's that, just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're going to be good at leadership. Leadership requires a certain set of behaviors, that everybody can learn. But, and certainly being a subject matter expert in something can be great. You could be really good at your job, be an expert in that, but that doesn't mean you're good at helping people perform well at theirs, right? Inspiring people. I see this all the time in sports. An athlete is amazing, right? Michael Jordan, amazing athlete, not such an amazing coach, not such an amazing athletic leader, as they're trying to get people to do things the way that they did things. And, we're all individuals, right? We all have our own history and we all have our own reinforcers. So I think that's important. It could be that
in the reverse, it seems to be true in some cases as well, right? You see, have coaches that may have played in the big leagues, but didn't have stellar careers, or may have played in college, but not pros, etc.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I never, I trained mixed martial arts. I was a boxer first. I trained mixed martial arts for years. I never had a mixed martial arts fight, but I have multiple champions. So you can be a really great coach and not a great athlete. Although I wasn't a bad boxer. So yes, that the both are that both are definitely true. I think it can also be people are comfortable with them, right? So like, hey, I want to give you a promotion because I feel safe with you. I feel comfortable with you, and that could be a reason. I think it could be sometimes that they're with the organization for a long time. And so that means they're kind of next in line for promotion. It's just the way we do things around here. That might be a reason that people are moved up. Sometimes it's the good old boys or good old girls club, right? Which is a shame. And I've seen that happen a lot of time, man, and nepotism and all sorts of stuff like that. That's unfortunate, especially when you see it in education. Like, gosh, man, kids are being hurt, staff are being hurt, faculty being hurt because, this is a very important position, man, leading a school, leading a district. It's all extremely important. And then there are the people who are really good at kissing butt. Those folks that get hired for kissing butt, I'm again looking at the people who are hiring them, who are the people in those leadership positions that want to hire butt kissers. I start to question their leadership. So I think, those are some general reasons. I think that people get promoted that don't necessarily have the skills. And of course, you can go back to the interviewing and saying that, hey, maybe people, just don't have great interviewing skills. That can be a tough thing. And they think that the person is successful, but they're not aware of all these other things. Like, leadership's not about what people know and all those pieces, right? It's about inspiring a group of people to, move towards common goals.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about the Empowering Parents with ACT course. Parenting, like child growth, is developmental and dynamic, and it must change over time as children's needs change. But supporting parents to develop long-term, sensitive, responsive, and effective parenting practices can feel challenging or even impossible. And that's why I'm excited to let you know about the Empowering Parents with ACT, a new on-demand course from Praxis Continuing Education and Training. Taught by Doctors Lisa Coyne and Evelyn Gould, this course presents a powerful acceptance and commitment training-based approach to supporting parents and caregivers with evidence-based interventions. Designed for anyone who works with caregivers and their families, including children with mental health issues, autism, physical or developmental differences, chronic health issues, and other challenges, this self-paced training will help you work with caregivers to help their families grow and thrive. So to watch a free video lesson from Empowering Parents with ACT and to learn more about it, go to praxiscet.com/parents. Again, that's praxiscet.com/parents, or you can simply go to the show notes for this episode. You touched on this earlier, Paulie, but I think it's important to kind of return to it. The cost of I guess suboptimal leadership. Can you talk to that a little bit? You have all these things we see in the news about like the quiet quitting or burnout, people taking lots of mental health days and things like that. So, this is, and again, we're using this term bad leadership, just kind of, using just kind of common language to talk about it, certainly. But I'm interested. I know you for that presentation looked at some stats and just had some general ideas about the cost of these sorts of things. Can you talk to that aspect?
Yeah, well, first of all, anecdotally, right, if we were all to think about when we've been under bad leadership, right, and you get pissed off, you get blamed for something, or somebody engages in some behavior that's coercive with you, what does that do to your performance, right? Does that bring out the best in you? And it's almost never does, especially if you feel fear, right? When you start to feel fear, you get like this tunnel vision. And when you have tunnel vision, if you think about it, you're not thinking about something. You're not innovating anymore. You're not performing optimally. What you're doing is you are trying to avoid being in the trouble. So your mind shuts down, right? It's almost, locks into that kind of primal brain or whatever they say it is. But I can tell you from coaching in mixed martial arts that when my fighters feel safe, right, when their defense is really good the game slows down for them, and then now they're able to access their complete repertoire of offense, right? And because they feel safe. When people feel psychologically safe, because essentially they're, getting in touch with lots of positive reinforcement, and they're not behaving for fear of consequences, because when you do that, you get compliance at the best, and only when people are looking, well, they're just going to perform better. But you think about that when you've been at the water fountain complaining, or how long you've been on the phone with somebody saying, "Can you believe they did this?" And all those pieces of it, where you could have been, engaging in better performance that are going to, really help the organization. So, anecdotally, if you think about your own history and what you've been through, you're like, yeah, that is true. We've all done that. But Harvard came out with some stats that were very interested. And these are a few years old, like 5 or 6 years old. But, I've experienced it personally. I've seen this stuff, right? So one of them is higher absenteeism, 37% higher absenteeism under bad leadership, 49% more accidents, 50% more healthcare costs, 50% more likely to quit. And by the way, when people quit, they're saying that the cost of turnover is about 20% of an individual salary. So there's all this stuff costs, right? This is short-sighted when people are trying to force folks to do things beyond the values and the ethics of it and all those pieces of it. There's actually a cost to the organization. 60% more errors, 70% more likely to die early from toxic workplace, 80% of workplace accidents attributed to stress, and 80% of doctor visits attributed to stress. So, bad leadership is just bad, man. It's bad. It hurts people, and it has a ripple effect, not only across the organization, and not only does it hurt profit and, of course, hurt the consumers, and especially in our field, bad leadership is really bad, because we are serving a lot of times, vulnerable learners, people who are in need.
Yeah.
And so we can't think about, when I hear people say we got to do it for the learners in schools, I say we have to do it for the students. You can't make it about those folks, right? The consumers, without making it about the people with the organization, period. You cannot do that, right? You have to consider both those. So, that data was pretty, compelling right there, but I've seen it, man. I've seen all this stuff. I couldn't quote you those stats to know how many accents and all that stuff, but I've seen the negative impact that also, overflows into people's houses, their personal lives, right? Depression, anxiety. It's terrible, man. It's terrible. And in our field, by the way, brother, which is part of why I wanted to have this talk, is that we know better. We know better, right? Maybe other fields we can excuse, but we are equipped with the greatest science in the world. And we're supposed to be leveraging positive reinforcement. But for something happens when we get into our own organizations and we get this thing that I call behavioral myopia. And that means we forget all about the science. And we know that we've forgotten about it if somebody's not performing well and you're pissed at them and you're blaming them, or, you're thinking they're lazy or this, that, and the other, and you're trying to coerce people to do things. If you're doing those things, that means you are no longer thinking through a behavior analytic lens. And you're not to blame. We all have our own history that we that have shaped what we're doing. But, we have to keep that lens on, and we have to think about adjusting the environment to bring out the best in that person, especially if it's happening at scale. And so there's so many people, so many leaders in our own field that are not practicing what they preach at the consumer level. And I wish they would. Again, not bad people. They really need organizational behavior management. And they really need to learn how to give feedback and use metrics. And they need to consider social validity, right? Finding out how people feel about the way things are going around here. Matt, I bet a lot of people listening to this podcast, right, when they listen to it, if I ask them, how often do you guys have like a climate or a culture survey? And most people are going to say,
what?
Every year. Right. Or what?
What's that?
What's that? Or every year. Right. And so I look at that as a friggin' autopsy. Like, what are you going to do with that kind of data at the end of the year? You need to be regularly checking in to see how people feel about the way things are going around here.
The cure for that is ordering pizza.
You're right, man. Yes. Right. Right. It's silly stuff, man. We're doing, employee of the month stuff, which, creates more losers than it does winners and all this kind of stuff that doesn't work. It just, but people are trying to do things, but I don't know. It's like, again, I see so much of it. Again, we can't blame the learner. I think that in our our coursework that we're so conditioned to think about the use of the science and working with people with disabilities, and thank goodness it's there for them so we can help them because they need it. But we forget about applying it in all aspects of our life because it is so prevalent. I just see so much of it that there's got to be a reason for it, man. There's got to be, and that's where my bet's coming on.
Hey everyone, another quick break here. I want to let you know about the University of Cincinnati Online. Balancing work and life can be difficult, and that's why UC Online designed a Master's of Education in Behavior Analysis program that's 100% online and asynchronous, which means you log on when it works for you. Their student success coordinators will work with you from start all the way until graduation to ensure you are receiving the support you need. Graduate in as few as 5 semesters from a top 10 program in total number of graduates, and prepare for the BCBA exam. The program is FAFSA eligible, and UC also offers a business partnership program to offer tuition discounts to eligible employees. If you want to learn more, go to online.uc.edu and click the Request Info button, or just check the show notes for this episode for links that will be waiting there for you. So we've, I guess, established the rationale here. So let's get into the actual. You developed this clever acronym, CLOWN. Oddly, it's about to kind of describe some of these pet practices. Well, so walk us through that a little bit. So I'd like to hear the basic elements of each one of those letters.
Let me do this little disclaimer here, and that is the characters and events depicted in this talk are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead is purely coincidental. I don't want anybody to think that I'm talking about them or somebody that we've worked with together. This is just a general set of behaviors that I've experienced.
Right. So a composite, if you will, of
there you go.
Various experiences and observations, and
that's it. Through a lifetime of seeing this stuff, and I've seen, because I worked in school districts as a consultant, I've experienced a lot of leadership, tons of it. But I was fortunate to go around see good leadership, and I did see some really good leadership. See bad leadership, and
we will get to good leadership here, I promise.
Yeah,
so this
I've
is
seen
not
the
just
good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
All right. So, but what I've seen this kind of like 4 general response classes of what I term bad leadership, right? And so, in general, they're coercive, they lack objectivity. We could be described as wearisome, right? And wears people down, and they're not skilled. Well, and miraculously, that creates this kind of cool acronym called clowns. And so I decided to kind of create a clown scale. And, behaviorally anchor it, because that's what we do. And it starts with, small clowns, and it goes all the way up to ass clowns. And so I had like 10 anchors on the scale. And, I would like to unpack those with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It's like a Letterman thing, man, the top 10.
That's right. You're like Scoville units.
Well, so the first one is that, and again, I want to say that I've done most of this stuff, if not all of this stuff, probably in repetition, right? So don't feel bad if you're doing these things.
I'll throw my hat into that ring as well.
We've all been clowns, right? There's different levels of it. Hopefully, I wasn't ass clown too much, but some people are ass clowns more than others. I would just say that. So the first one is, and this is probably a more common one, they tell too much and they ask too little, right? And so, first of all, if you think about this from a behavior analytic point of view, telling creates prompt dependency, right? So if all you're doing is telling people what they need to do, they're never going to be able to perform without your support. We need people to be able to better assess, problem solve, make decisions, and take actions when we're not present. And the analogy I make to people, and it's an easy one to understand, is the GPS. I still go to the West Palm Beach airport. I'm there every month, it feels like, and I still have to use the GPS. It's only 50 miles away. It's a straight shot down 95, and I can't tell you what exit I have to get on. Why? I'm prompt dependent, right? I haven't had to strengthen my neural pathways or whatever the neuroscientists might say, so I can, discriminate all the signs in the environment that let me know, all right, this is the right exit. I got to get off here and go this way. And so we don't want to do this. Now, also, asking questions cultivates humility. It engages others, gives us more data, helps us connect with them. And when we talk about questions, they're behavioral questions what was different as a result of you doing this, that, or the other? What did you do to make that happen? What did you see when? How's it working for you? What was your best experience? Why will you do that? What might you do tomorrow? What can I do to help you? So all these questions, again, to get people to be better observers of the behavior, the impact of the behavior on the environment, the impact of the environment on their behavior. And when you ask questions too, it involves people. People don't want things in the organizational setting done to them. They want to be involved, that you engage them and give people choices. And asking questions is a great way to find out more about people, to engage them, and to move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So the next one, this is a very common knowledge one, but we're still all guilty of this stuff. And I really try not to do this, man. I try to do my best to focus on this, and this is a staple of our field. And that is, they end up correcting more than they positively reinforce. I think what is 4-to-1 is a common number that's put out there. Now, they might be well-intended because they're seeing, performance that's poor and they need to correct it. But, I would say that if they're not setting smaller goals and accomplishments along the way, well, you're going to constantly be correcting people because performance is not going to, meet whatever criteria you want. So while correcting behavior, people win the battle, right? They do it because they see that it works for them. It's negatively reinforcing, or it gets, we're having a problem and I don't want that problem anymore. So, I use this, but they end up losing the war, right? And they become aversive to people.
Do you know where that 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio came from?
I think there was. Let me see. Was the Lasada? There was some research done a while back, and it was debunked, and then it came back.
There was, it came out of, there may be other studies looking at this, but I am familiar with have you ever heard of it's a husband and wife research team, the Gottmans? I can't remember. They did a lot of, their claim to fame, or their, I guess, area of focus is marriage therapy. And they took extensive hours. They brought married couples into their lab and just filmed their, kind of mundane interactions and things like that. And they coded hours and hours and hours of videotape with multiple, many, many, many different couples. And they found that was the happiest couples had that ratio of positive to corrective or positive to negative interactions. So I always like to mention that to folks, because that 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 becomes part of this kind of behavioral folklore that kind of gets handed down. And it's just interesting to know where these things kind of originate from, because this one came out of an area that's not necessarily related to education.
Yeah, I never heard that, man. Thanks for educating me.
And if there are other applications or other research labs that looked at this, please give us a shout, because I'd like to know about it. But I always like to give the Gottmans a shout out, because that was some pretty groundbreaking work that they did, for the last couple of decades.
Well done, Gottmans. Well, whatever the number is, we know this, right? If you're going to correct behavior, it's fine to do it as long as positive reinforcement is plentiful, right? Because you have to. But if it's not, then you really become aversive to people, and they're not going to want you around, and it's going to hurt performance, and ultimately it's going to hurt, the consumer that you're serving. So I mentioned this earlier, and that is they fail to involve the stakeholders. This is crucial. And the simple way to think about it is that the more people author something, the more they are going to be to own it, right? It's such a simple thing to do, but we forget. We end up telling people what they need to do instead of asking them. This comes back to the question asking, right? What do they think about things, and guiding them with good questions. So that's very powerful. So that's the 8th one. The 7th one, this is the countdown to the top one. They say when you want the job done right, you have to do it yourself. Now, we probably already all said that sometime or another, but, that's not what leadership's about, right? Leadership's about, inspiring people towards a common goal, not doing the job yourself. That's on the other end of leadership, So, people want to feel confident. They want to feel needed. They want to feel empowered. And so what I say, clowns, is that don't forget about the performance diagnostics. If they're not performing to some standard, there's a reason for it, right? It's a can't do or won't do, right? It's skill deficit or performance deficit, which means that, we have to intervene in the right way. And if it's a performance deficit, oftentimes we have to think about our own behavior and how often are they being observed? Are we helping them see the impact of their behavior on the environment? What kind of feedback are we giving them? How often are we giving them feedback? And all those things, we have ownership of that. Are we prompting them, because sometimes people are very well intended, but they're just not in the habit yet. Have we given them the resources? All these pieces, right? But if you're saying that to yourself, really, you might want to reflect on that. That's not leadership, Number 6, this one drives me nuts. I probably should put this more towards the top of the list or the bottom where it is, more towards number 1. They treat people differently based on their position on the org chart. This drives me friggin' nuts, man. I cannot stand this, Matt. Anybody's going to meet me anywhere, like I'm going to treat the maintenance guy like I'm treating the CEO. In fact, I might treat the maintenance guy better. Just because, man, like sometimes I feel like, gosh, I mean, maybe they're happy in their job, but I always see so many people like looking down on folks because of what they get paid or because of what they drive and all these things. So it makes me feel bad. And I want to compensate for that stuff. So when I see this, and I've seen it, I certainly have people being judged by their degree, by their title. Oh man, that just drives me effing nuts. I don't want you to have to bleep this out, right?
Yeah,
it really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody should be. Yeah.
And I would say if you're in, I remember being an undergraduate in college, meeting some of my professors and being invited to, work in their labs and things like that, and being treated like a colleague instead of a peon.
That's awesome, man.
It is incredibly motivating. So the reverse is, I think all these have an inverse to it. These are kind of like do and don't, pairs, if you will, or at least that's the way I kind of experienced the members of this list here, because I've had both experiences, of course. But yeah, when someone in a position of prestige or I guess power or what have you, and you don't have that, pulls you aside and tries to help you, treats you as an equal, or at least treats you in such a way that lets them know that they're interested in developing you or helping you reach whatever goals that you have. It's one of the most wonderful feelings, and I think a lot of behavior analysts listening to this, especially when we talk to people a lot about their first experiences in behavior analysis, coming in contact with that mentor that in which you got treated that way is kind of a common theme.
I'm glad you brought up higher ed because I agree with you 100%. For my students, like I feel like I'm there to serve them. I look at like the leadership servant. I'm there to serve them, and I feel bad sometimes when they're extra nice in the emails. It's like because when you're a professor, you have like power over them. And I don't want them to feel that way. I want to feel like I'm there for them. I want their experience to be great. I want them to learn through the coursework, not be afraid of me and, afraid that they're going to get, bad grades. And it makes me wonder, like, what has been their history? Because, when you have a professor, like you mentioned those guys, and I've had some of those, man. As a matter of fact, I've been to one of their weddings. We're very close friends. He's become a mentor to me. Very fortunate to have that kind of thing, man. Life-changing to me. And so, people have to don't forget, like when you were in this position of authority, man, you have a lot of influence and you can make a positive difference, right? A large ripple effect across somebody else's life and thereby the lives of other people, so it's powerful stuff, man. It's good. Well, so I think that no matter where you're at, right, everybody should be treated with the same respect. And in an organization, everybody should be helped to understand how their role is connected to the vision, the mission, in whatever important business results. Like in education, I want the cafeteria workers and the maintenance folks to know that, what you do helps the students to feel safe, and it keeps them healthy, and we nurture them and make sure they have sustenance, and that helps to produce student achievement and et cetera, all that stuff is very important. I want them to feel a part of what's going on in the schools because they are a part of it and they should feel a part of it. So that was number 6. Now, here's one that's a very common one, and that is number 5. These leaders are these ass clowns, or somewhere on these clowns. Or this might not be an ass clown, but they're results focused. And so people are like, what's wrong with that? You want to produce results? Well, we know that all results require people behaving, right? If you're going to change a result, it means that you got to do something more or less or differently, right? So this is really important. But the problem is that if you're only focusing on results, you're not focusing on what has occurred to achieve those results. And there's all sorts of different ways to get results. I've seen people get great results, right, with really bad behavior, with really unethical behavior. And so we want to look at behavior, but because we want to reinforce the behavior that's going well. We want to learn from what people are doing in there. So maybe we can shine a light on that, hold them up as an exemplar, and help other people perform that way. And that's going to only benefit, the organization and the consumers that are being served. So, if people are just looking at results, that can be a big problem. I mean,
yeah, and I bet that's huge.
Cheated, stolen.
I bet that's huge in the behavioral safety world as well. So if
yeah, brother,
you could inadvertently reinforce repertoires having to do with like hiding accidents or something like that. If you're trying to get some goal for your team of having X number of accident-free days. There's all sorts of weird things that could be inadvertently shaped up. I don't know if this is folklore or not, but you're old enough to remember this. So, do you remember when Domino's first came out and they had that if it's not there within 30 minutes, you get your pizza free?
Yeah, I remember that.
And I don't know if this is true or not, but I think they had to stop that because they got sued. This may be an urban legend, but if you think of the pressure a delivery person must be under to make it to a residence in 30 minutes or less. Well, think of the behavior that leads up to that outcome. So you have people speeding and, rolling through stop signs and running red lights and just driving like maniacs. And so, yeah, if you, that always stuck out to me as an example of if you focus just on the result, you could achieve the result, but at what cost? And that cost could be considerably high.
No, that's a great example. One of the examples I use is it's a true story. Of many years ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was in a school and there was a lot of behavior problems, and they were asking me to help turn the school around. And there was one classroom that I wasn't getting any behavior problems in. I'm like, thank God, man, I can just work somewhere. Thank you so much to the teacher, high-fiving her because I wasn't getting called to the classroom. She was a long-term sub, and it turned out that, the reason why I was getting calls in the classroom is because when the students were acting out, she would ask them to go to the back and get a switch off the tree, and I'm not saying that she ever hit them with a switch, but apparently that was, aversive enough to, suppress behavior. And of course, when that was found out, she was fired and the behavior went off the chain, and there was no learning that occurred that whole time. So I was only looking at that result, not going in there. I should have been going in there and saying, this is amazing. What is this teacher doing? Let me help other teachers do it as well. And I might have got to the bottom of it. But again, we also want to look at behaviors to find out what's going well so we can help other people do those things too. So we got to look at both. Really got to look at both. Number 4, this one, again, all these are starting to drive me nuts more and more. These kind of leaders reinforce tattling, right? Like corporate spies, if you will. And this stuff breeds paranoia, man. Can really have deep and long-lasting, performance abolishing ripple effect across an organization. And so, unfortunately, this is a really bad sign. If this is happening in your organization, if you're doing this, don't do that, man. What you really want to do is positively reinforce others for providing positive reinforcement. And if people are coming to you with problems, that's okay. Not saying that's not okay, but they're coming to you and they're bringing solutions. And the purpose is to help people, right? Not rat people out or tell people, man, that is just like really toxic to a culture. And leaders, you can reinforce that stuff. Right now, if people come and tattle, what you do with that information, how you receive it, what you say to the person that's giving it, again, you want to reinforce bringing solutions, right? And you want to reinforce people helping other people before they come to you and do that whole piece of it. Were you able to help them? How do you think you might approach your peer with this, right? Again, we want to build capacity. The best leaders create more leaders around them. So, have you experienced any tattling stuff, my man?
Not really. I'm a consultant, so a lot of, I kind of go in and out of schools, but I'm aware that it happens within schools. And I've certainly heard that in various other types of agencies that I've worked.
First grade, you see a lot lot of talenting, man.
Among students, sure.
Should be left there.
I know it happens instead. My particular role is that I'm fortunate enough to be, insulated from some of those things. I see a lot of other things on this list, but that's one I at least it doesn't directly affect me all that much.
That you know of, man, unless
that I know of. Yeah, and I'd like to keep it that way. So
all right. Number 3 is these leaders, they own the accomplishments of others. Now this is some real ass clown stuff, man. When somebody does something and you own that and you shine the light on yourself instead of the people that are doing it, man, that is demoralizing. Cool. No, it's not, man. I mean, the greatest leaders, not only do they reinforce for achieving the goals, but they really turn progress into accomplishments, right? So they look at what tasks need to be accomplished and they look to reinforce that, right? They're constantly in search of ways to provide positive reinforcement, keep people moving in the right direction. They also create lots of opportunities for people to get in touch with positive reinforcement because they develop these good systems that, good systems actually, provide lots of positive reinforcement for value-added behaviors. And so that's what good leaders do. But man, owning the accomplishments of others, I've seen this stuff. Oh man, it's a horrible thing, man. That's a deal breaker for most people. Number 2, I mentioned this earlier. They play the blame game. I mean, this is the height of behavioral myopia. If we're blaming, we are really not looking at the environment. We're not thinking about what's helping the performance, what's hurting the performance. So, the best leaders, in our field, we should be doing this. We should be examining the environmental contingencies. What's going on here? Why is that happening? And, how are we going to adjust the environment to make it better? So, the greatest leaders see that they are also part of those performers' environments, right? And so they're really reflecting on their own behavior, right? My fighters lose, and I'm not saying I'm the greatest leader, but I'm just saying that this is true. When my fighters lose, I focus on what do I need to do more or less or differently for that fighter. I don't blame the fighter for losing. Like I want them to perform their best. So how are we going to adjust, the gym environment next time? And how am I going to adjust my behavior as part of that fighter's environment to help them perform better next time? And so here's the number one thing, right? This is total ass clown. This is some ass clown stuff right here that I'm about to say, right? And I don't think I've ever done this, but maybe I did. Maybe I did it inadvertently. And if I did, I would look in the mirror right now. I would definitely call myself an ass clown. But number 1, they demean people and rationalize it as a lesson to them and others, right? And so there's freaking no reason to demean people ever. I just don't see it. Telling people what to do and demeaning them created lasting success, my man. There's going to be many more effective leaders and organizations. So it's never, ever, 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 ever the way. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have tough talks with people. And, we let the data do talking. We ask permission. We show respect and involve people in creating performance improvement plans and all this stuff. But there is just never a reason to demean people, man. I just go look in the mirror and I don't know. I don't even know what to tell you, man. Don't do it anymore. If you recognize that you're doing it, just stop. It's bad.
Yeah, that's definitely a good candidate for number 1 on that list, or number 10, or whatever way we're looking at this.
The top number 1, man. That was like Letterman's countdown.
Okay, got it.
Gavoni's countdown.
All right, very cool. So I want to conclude here with a couple of questions, kind of related. There's going to be people listening to this, and you and I have already acknowledge that some of these are things that everyone does, and nobody's perfect. And it's one of those things where, at least from my point of view, it's not like, oh, I got this. I'm always, it's like a value instead of a goal. You're always going to be working on, doing the opposite of the members of this list, right? Or at least that's my perspective. But I guess my question for you, Paulie, there's got to be people listening to this who are in positions of, supervisory roles or managerial positions and things like that, who might be thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing any of these things? So what would you say to that person driving around, or maybe just put I guess a more neutral or positive spin on this? What would you advise someone who wants to improve and optimize their supervisory or leadership capabilities relative to the points that you just made of these kind of these clownish type of behaviors?
Well, first of all, I want to remind everybody that it is just behavior, okay? And the first step is like awareness. And I had mentioned this a couple of times, that's being aware of your behavior, the impact of your behavior on the environment, the impact of the environment on your behavior. And so there's a couple of things that do that. Like we talked earlier about looking at just results data, but you need to check in with your people. You need to find out how they're feeling about the way things are going around there, and think about what you might need to do more or less or differently to impact that stuff. And part of that, I think, as well, is I love the ACT matrix, man. To me, the ACT matrix is one of the most perfect tools, man. It's like preferences assessment.
You are an ACT matrix evangelist.
I am, man. It's a functional, it's a FBA. This is for yourself, right? FBA, self-monitoring. It's a behavior intervention plan. It's a set of a social validity. It's self-validity, right? Making sure that your behaviors are actually in line with your values. So I just love the heck out of that ACT matrix. But, for leaders, like, you need to check your own values and look at your behavior alignment. And are things aligned? And like, what's showing up for you? Because look, leadership is tough, man. It is, the larger the organization, tougher it is. In education, man, I think school leadership might be one of the toughest leadership positions in the country because, all the stuff that gets thrown in that's another conversation. But you need awareness first. You need to understand when you think this way and feel this way, how those are precursors to, what you do. And if what you're doing is, you're doing it to get rid of those crappy feelings and thoughts and all those things, and you might be winning the battle in the moment. But if it's not aligned with your values, you're moving further and further away from your values. But you also need to have shared values. So you need to know what the people under you value, right? And so, identifying those is a great exercise, finding out what's important to the people, looking for their shared values and finding out what shows up for them, what they're worried about, what their big fears are, and, how they might be engaging in unproductive behaviors to do that and what they need to do instead. And so, there are certain, really important leadership behaviors that people can engage in. One of those being, checking in with people to see how they feel about the way things are going around there, basic culture. It doesn't have to be, big, a huge like surveys, simple ones. You can do 360-degree feedback surveys to find out how people are feeling about the way things are going around here. Now, I want to say something about these surveys, all right? Because they can be very biased. And, especially in a culture that's toxic, because people have fear, right? People are not going to accurately report if they feel that they're going to be punished for it. And so, I think, if you really cared about how people are feeling, I would also have like a little inner observer agreement, maybe something like have an outside agency come in to validate, that those surveys are accurate. So people know that it's 100% anonymous. There's no way anybody can find out. They're only going to summarize the data. Nobody will ever be set up. And if you're getting data that's relative to what you're collecting, that's probably a pretty good indicator that things are going in the right direction. But if not, you might want to consider, like, there might be some, toxicity. Say the word for me, brother. I'm not going to get out right.
Toxicity.
That's it, brother. I think I might have had it right.
I think, yeah.
So that might be going on. So I just had that kind of thought about that. In fact, speaking about that, man, in that kind of climate, I have been exposed to some narcissistic leadership. And, I think that one way to avoid it, unless it's the CEO, and then, man, you're out of luck. I don't even know I have no answer for that, if it's the top of the pile. But for people who are in leadership positions down the org chart, I really think these type of social validity surveys can be huge because a lot of these people, they want the attention, right? And they all the stuff that I talked about earlier, and it manifests itself into really poor leadership. They own stuff, they do this and that. But if you put that on a scorecard, a balanced scorecard, and that is like how people are feeling about your leadership, right? And that is what's going to get you in touch with some other reinforcement. Well, then it gives some sort of metric, and it puts the their leader in a position to reinforce the good behavior. And who knows, maybe they're not deep narcissists. It's just like, well, they just didn't know a better way. And this is a good way to help them become better. But like the true narcissist, functionally, they love attention. Sometimes I think they, signs of damage, emotional or even physical damage, man. They love compliance for others, and they seem to love mediating reinforcers. They want to control all the reinforcers. And so, that is a tough culture to be within. But if you have some good social validity surveys in there, that might be one way to kind of mitigate some of those issues.
All right. Well, I appreciate you reaching out and prompting me to have this conversation with you on the podcast. I learned a lot for sure. And so I guess the take-home message is don't be an ass clown, folks.
Yes, and man, leverage the power of positive reinforcement.
There you go. That's much more professionally stated. Thank you.
Yes, and have metrics for your leadership, man.
All right. Thanks, Paulie.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.